So, because Ken has given us so much of his wonderful time, he has to shoot off, so we're not going to be able to ask him questions, but that's okay, because we've got another fantastic speaker who's come to share some of her brilliant journeys, her brilliant visions, and her stories. I'm very excited to be bringing to the stage Malia Bouattia, the President of the National Union of Students. She was elected in National Conference in April 2016. She's the first Muslim and black woman president of the NUS, and she is a fierce and radical voice in spaces like this for many, many years. Please put your hands together for Malia.
Friends, comrades, assalamu alaikum. I got so lost in that speech and the incredible power of it all that I forgot to actually make my way to the stage, so I apologise to the organisers, and it's incredibly hard to follow. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organisers of this event, both for inviting me, but also for having put together such a fantastic few days. We need more spaces of political debate and discussion, more spaces to clarify ideas, more spaces to get together collectively and put forward our strategies for winning the radical alternative that this country needs and that our class deserves. I've been asked to discuss with you the current problems in society, how to address them, and what my ideal vision for a progressive future is. A pretty tall order for such a short space of time, I'm sure you'll agree, but I'll have a go. In truth, the current state of our society is crisis. The problems are screaming at us everywhere that we look. The question confronting us in this situation is whether we decide to act. When Black Lives Matter took to the streets, they said, this is not a moment, this is a movement. But in order to build a movement, it's necessary to understand the moment that we are in. There is no doubt that we have suffered many defeats over the years, and there is much to decry about our situation. But we're also living through a period of significant and exciting developments. It's true that today we face the politics of Donald Trump and Theresa May, but we're also meeting them with the politics of Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, Podemos, and so many other progressive forces around the world. When we face cuts and privatisation, we have a labour movement growing in confidence, from junior doctors to cinema workers, nursing students to Deliveroo drivers. Where we face a backlash against women's rights, we're taking it on in new struggles with groups like Sisters Uncut. Where there's a housing crisis, there are those taking on landlords through rent strikes and eviction resistance. Whilst austerity and inequality are dominant, we have also seen the emergence of wide alliances made up of students, workers, migrants, claimants, and other networks all across the globe. We're living through a period of political rebirth for the left, one where new and old ideas and political projects are clashing, merging, developing the appropriate language and methods for our times. And that process is not only exciting, it's necessary. James Baldwin once said, those who say it cannot be done are usually interrupted by others doing it. Well, we've got a lot of interrupting to do. The hundreds and thousands of people who have supported Corbyn in recent months is just one example of the enormous potential for organising the kind of social movements that we so desperately need. All of us here have a role to play in making that happen. And that means in the weeks and months ahead, we have to look at the many ways that we can contribute and the many ways we can take action. At NUS, we're currently mobilising students against the government's move to tear apart further and higher education. Their bill is attempting to move us totally away from a conception of education as a social good which strengthens and enriches our society towards one that is a privilege to be paid for purely for the benefit of your future employer. They've cut our grants, crushed our staff, tripled our fees, and they just keep coming back for more. But now we are fighting back for what education must be. We are building from regional networks to national demonstration, and on the 19th of November, students will join their teachers and lecturers in a mobilisation, not just a national demo, but an international one. We will be joined by our counterparts in Canada, South Africa, France, in various continents. We will come onto the streets and make ourselves heard. We will make it clear that the fight for access to education is universal, global, and one which must be addressed with urgency. Not only do we want our colleges funded, our fees removed, but we want every international student and every migrant to be welcomed here too. Because as we sit here, many international students sit at home wondering when the UK Border Agency will call them to start their deportation process. It's been a toxic year for migrants, and by the way things are going, it looks to get worse. So this year, we will proudly say that we stand for education and that we will fight racism, whether it be on our campuses, on our streets, or in our political system. As we act and as we build solidarity, I also think that we have to address the question of organisation. I believe that one of the greatest weaknesses that we face in our lack of networks that can carry our movements forward in the long term, that can coordinate our efforts beyond just moments of explosion. Across the world, it seems that we're confronted time and time again with the ability of people to revolt and momentarily unsettle the establishment. But we lack the ability to carry those fights on for long periods of time in the face of violence, repression, and manipulation of governments and states. We need to deepen a process of building organisation across the movement. Whether there are students' unions or trade unions, social movement groups or neighbourhood collectives, political parties or single-issue networks, we need places to learn the lessons from our past, from our defeats, and from our victories. We need places where we can build long-term solidarity, support, and struggle. Without developing those institutions from below, I fear that we will fail to develop the social depth and breadth of experience needed to win. So finally, what is my vision of a radical future? I think there's a danger in imagining that we can decide here and now what a radical future will or should look like. It's in the process of change that we can decide that it is in the process of change that the future is formed through struggle and the unleashing of the creativity that people actively reshape the world around them. The greatest thinkers, the social architects, the radical proposals will come from people who are not even in this room. They may not even think of themselves as political, but they have an intimate knowledge of just how violent and destructive our current society is. Does that mean that we don't propose anything? No, not at all. Personally, I believe that struggle cannot end until we achieve the destruction of the structures that make up class, race, and gender. It is within the intersection between exploitation and oppression that the violence of capitalism operates. It's within those parameters that wars are fought, states are built, lives are destroyed, and democracy is suffocated in the eternal pursuit of profit. So it seems to me that through the dismantling of these structures, we can hope to build a world based on people and mass democracy in all aspects of our life, political, economical, and social. The question then is what forms of action point towards these goals? In each campaign, in each election, each struggle, the practical decisions that we make should be guided by our ultimate aim. So what is it that we fight for in the immediate term? I've already spoken about the fight for free education and migrant rights. With that, we want an NHS that is properly funded, not hanging by the thread. We want housing. We want housing with affordable rents, not an out-of-control market. We want a welfare system that supports the poorest, not subsidises the bosses. All of these issues have been fought in recent months with militant action and met with wide public support. And when renters strike, students march, and workers fight, all of us must stand together. We are constantly told to be realistic and that we cannot change society, but every single victory teaches us that this is a lie. It was the Italian revolutionary Antonio Gramsci who wrote, "The old world is dying and the new one is not yet born." Comrades, our struggles will be its birth. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you very, very, very much for that, Malia. We've had some very interesting questions come through on Twitter, so I hope it's all right if we could share some of them with you. So the first one that we had from you wonderful, wonderful people with your wonderful tweeting fingers is, how did a traditionally conservative, cautious organisation like the NUS end up supporting things like rent strikes? What happened?
So I think that there's certainly been a transition in NUS and what the leadership stands for these days. But I'd say that really my election and having a president standing here supporting rent strikes, free education and so on didn't necessarily happen in a vacuum. This was a long time coming. Students were sick of being told that we need to, don't take to the streets, stay quiet, we'll sit at the right tables and we'll make the right deals. Well, we're at the point where NHS bursaries are being scrapped, disabled maintenance allowances being cut to the bone, maintenance grants are gone. We could potentially be dealing with another rise in fees, and education has been further controlled by the market. We're at the point where we have lost absolutely everything whilst being told that compromise is the way. Well, it's not. And I think that, and this relates strongly to what we've seen play out in the Labour Party. I think the sentiment across society is we are fed up of having everything that we hold so dear and that's so important to our society being totally destroyed, whilst those in power tell us to not take action. And we're organising, and I guess here I am, standing as your NUS National President as a result, supporting rent strikes.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, absolutely, we're not taking it anymore. And I think you've empowered a lot of people to come and stand with you and also say that we do not accept this anymore. So thank you for your work. I'm going to ask another question because you guys are coming up with some great stuff. This one I think is, how do we persuade students to support industrial action by their lecturers?
So actually, this is a good question because I joined many in the last pickets and particularly the institutions around London, and there was a sentiment that perhaps students weren't as informed about why you don't cross a picket and why solidarity was so important. I have a lot of hope, and particularly through the national demonstration on the 19th of November, we're organising alongside the UCU and there is a strong sense of unity across further and higher education in the battle that we're going in through this bill and the continued attacks and supposed reform to our education. That I think what we're seeing is regionally and locally UCU branches teaming up with students' unions and student activists across campuses and understanding, I guess, the old tradition of divide and conquer and how this bill and the proposed changes around the supposed teaching excellence framework, for example, which sets to pit academics and students against each other, is really being taken on, and we're not being fooled by it. So I do have a lot of hope in our ability through this national demonstration to understand each other's struggles and to be more collective in our response. And that's also part of my job this year, and I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. I think this is quite a broad question, but I think it's obviously a very important question. And someone's asked, in left spaces, they rarely perceive Black Lives Matter to be something that's spoken about. Someone in the audience was wanting you to speak a little bit specifically about what the relevance of Black Lives Matter is in the UK.
So I've actually prior to being president, I was the Black Students Officer, and I had the great fortune of touring the West Coast in the States, actually, alongside family members here. Many of them, actually, I see some of the banners that relate to some of the justice campaigns, which is incredible. But some of those whose loved ones were killed at the hands of the police or the state. And we went over to the States with Black Lives Matter to hear some of the accounts there and to hear how the brutality plays out and their ability to organise. And whilst Black Lives Matter is one of the most significant movements in a very long time, and one that intersects in the sense that what they are struggling for, what they are fighting for, goes beyond just the police actively killing black people and black communities, to taking on white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, quite frankly. And their network is incredible, so much so that it's become contagious. And here in the UK, Black Lives Matter, the UK chapter has now been established with a collection of organisations that have long been working against police brutality and state violence in general. And I think it's incredibly important that we get out of the habit of working in isolation and islands, because, you know, we want our networks to be the ones that take credit for that action. We need to be thinking about the border coalitions. We need to be understanding why Black Lives Matter is so important to tackling climate change, to working in opposition to the marketisation of education, and so on and so forth. And I think we have countless spaces in which we can do this. And I know I keep repeating it, but the national demonstration is going to be a clear indication of that.
And when is it?
On the 19th of November in London, so please do come along, where we're finding there will be a black student bloc, there will be a migrant student bloc, there will be such a variety, such a large collection of groups and organisations and networks that will be coming together and understanding why they need to lend their solidarity to this particular event, with the understanding that we will be there, you know, outside every police station, with every death and every commemoration of a murder at the hands of the state.
No justice, no peace. Thank you very, very, very much, Malia. You're an empowering, fierce advocator.